The United Nations this week commemorated the mass expulsion and displacement of Palestinians in 1948, known as the Nakba, for the first time. The same year marked the creation of the State of Israel. RT's Che Bose has more on the Day of Remembrance.
This week, Palestinians commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, or catastrophe, an event marking the establishment of the Israeli state that's seen by most Palestinians as the darkest moment in their troubled history. The Nakba led to the brutal displacement of over 750,000 Palestinians from their ancestral homelands, the decimation of over 400 of their villages, and the murder of thousands of innocent Palestinian civilians, including women and children. But for the first time in 75 years, the UN will be acknowledging the Nakba and its ongoing impact on the Palestinian people.
What Palestinians everywhere are required to do is to commemorate this tragedy, because it is the first time that the global community does not deny the Nakba. On these blessed days, we call on all our people to stand together to face the challenges facing our cause, our land and our sanctities, and to focus our compass towards confronting the occupation and getting rid of it.
Predictably, Israel has called for the UN event to be boycotted. Its closest ally, the US, has even cancelled events to commemorate the Nakba, with the House Speaker Kevin McCarthy saying it's wrong for members of Congress to traffic anti-Semitic tropes about Israel. British culpability for the Nakba of 1948 being well documented and rooted in the Balfour Declaration of 1917, in which Britain promised to create a national home for the Jewish people. Meanwhile, the Israeli ambassador to the UN has also described the commemoration of an event that remembers the massacre and displacement of Palestinians as somehow anti-Semitic.
Israel will not be swayed by this slanderous campaign to rewrite history, and therefore call on all member states that genuinely support reconciliation not to attend this shameful and anti-Semitic event.
Crucially for Palestinians, the Nakba isn't about some distant historic event back in 1948. The Nakba is a powerful living reminder of the establishment of the same Israeli state that to this day is accused of occupying their land, oppressing their people. And in the last few weeks alone, the Israeli strikes have killed dozens of innocent Palestinian civilians, caught up in the seemingly endless spiral of violence.
The situation in Gaza is very tragic and confusing, especially since children and women are terrified by the aggression and bombing of the Gaza Strip. Children live in a state of terror and apprehension because of this severe aggression.
We in the Gaza Strip are trying to survive despite the constant bombardment. The situation in Gaza is very difficult. There is fear and terror and a lot of mixed feelings.
Sadly, the right-wing radical Zionist voices that prop up Benjamin Netanyahu's Israeli government would feel right at home in 1948 when the Israeli state was established at great cost to the Palestinians. And as Israel's powerful friends continue to turn a blind eye to their friends' actions, it's likely that this won't be the last time the Nakba is remembered, not as an event in the distant past, but as a living reminder of the ongoing illegal occupation of Palestine and the oppression of its people.
Che Bose, well, the recent slew of Israeli attacks have also destroyed many Palestinian homes, and the cost to rebuild all of that damage is, as you'd imagine, considerable. RT spoke with Gaza's Deputy Minister of Public Works and Housing, who told us about the figures required and the process to reconstruct.
The Ministry of Labour and Housing is responsible for the housing sector and made a preliminary inventory of the damage during the latest aggression. During those 5 days, our technical crews were all over Gaza to estimate the scale of the damage to the housing sector. The raw statistics indicate that there are 103 housing units which were totally destroyed. In addition, around 2,800 partially damaged units, out of which 140 are completely uninhabitable and would need huge work to make them livable again. The total estimated cost to rebuild for all of these cases is $10 million. These are raw numbers and are still expandable. Since the end of the aggression, our field crews started making a detailed damage assessment process to all housing units. Because, as you know, during the aggression, not all areas are accessible. As soon as any building gets targeted and destroyed, our crews head there and start estimating the damage. The total amount needed to deal with the entire reconstruction for all previous cases, including this latest aggression, is about $200 million. In the previous years, we got some of the required funds through the United Nations Relief and Work Agency for Palestine refugees that intervened in the 2014 and 2021 aggressions and helped with rebuilding thousands of units funded by the KfW and a number of donors. The UNRWA is the organisation dealing with the refugees, so it's the one doing the reconstruction through technical follow-ups, using the self-help method by giving citizens a certain amount of money and making sure the rebuilding is happening. Even other organisations that contribute donations use the same method. Therefore, the funding and the distribution of funds is done through the organisations without any mediator. Their main focus was on the refugees. There are other donors like Saudi Arabia that donated to the UNRWA. Qatar built thousands of units after the 2014 and 2021 aggressions, along with Kuwait and a number of other countries. The obvious reason for the reconstruction delay is that the Israeli side doesn't want to finish the reconstruction quickly, which will enhance the resilience of the people. Therefore, this process is delayed and obstructed. The Israeli side refuses to reconstruct buildings owned by certain people using different excuses. Now, the international community in general might have different interests amid the Ukrainian crisis and other Arabian crises, like the war in Yemen.
South Asia to the Middle East, Palestinians clash with IDF soldiers at the Gaza-Israeli border on Thursday in protest at the annual flag march held in Jerusalem, marking Israel's capture of the Holy City in 1967. Yeah, this footage shows hundreds of flag-bearing Palestinians who gathered on the frontier, burning tires and Israeli flags and throwing stones at IDF troops. Soldiers fired tear gas and rubber bullets in response, injuring 3, according to local media reports. Well, airstrikes on Gaza this month have claimed the lives of at least 33 Palestinians, including 6 children, with families mourning the loss of their loved ones in the last number of days. We heard from one father whose 5-year-old son died of heart failure, which he says was caused by the severe stress of the Israeli attacks.
I heard a terrifying sound. The windows shattered and fell on us, and then smoke filled the house. Tamim screamed loudly and then fell silent. He used to go to the occupied territory for treatment as he required special care. After he screamed, I embraced him. Then I gave him to my wife so that she could check him. I had not realized that something had happened to him. After we've seen all the children who were martyred, I did not imagine that this could happen. I did not expect him to be afraid. I tried to put him to bed, and he fell asleep at 6 in the morning. He woke up at 12 in the afternoon, and his skin was yellow and his lips were blue. He refused to have breakfast. I called my sister's husband to take him to the hospital, but before he could arrive, Tamim started beating his chest in pain and then suffered a seizure and began shaking. They rushed him to the hospital, but he passed out in the car, and when we got there, they told us that his heart had stopped, but then his pulse returned weakly, so they put him in intensive care. I couldn't realize what had happened. When I entered the house the next day, I thought Tamim would be inside. It was the most difficult night of my life.